Sprouse, host of the Bible Forum, meets here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Tell your friends. The Pope is going to perform. Is that a good word? He's going to celebrate a Mass in Philadelphia when he's in town. He's going to be in Washington. He's going to be in Philadelphia, I think in September, October. And he's going to celebrate this Mass. Rick Warren is going to speak at this Mass. And I wonder aloud in my blog what it is that Rick Warren is going to say. Last year he endorsed, Rick Warren that is, he endorsed Lee Peterson's book, Catholics Come Home, saying, quote, "The mission of Tom Peterson and Catholics Come Home to bring souls home to Jesus and the Church is critically important during this challenging time in our history. I fully support this new evangelization project." There was no evangelization project. It would just come back to the church. But you see, in Roman Catholic doctrine, you can't be saved if you're not Catholic. The message that's being presented here is clear. It is suggesting that Roman Catholic soteriology, the doctrine of salvation, is the same as classic Protestant soteriology, which it is not. And Rick Warren knows the difference. And so over the next several blogs, you can go to my website, thebibleforum.net. You can read this blog. There will be 4 of them over the next week that works through different doctrinal and practical issues, trying to make a sincere effort in offering all due respect to Roman Catholics who may not understand the differences, and yet at the same time to make certain that there's no misunderstanding. It's different. The language of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and the particulars of Christian doctrine are well preserved through the writings of the early church and beyond. It is abundantly clear that Jesus was, with his entire life, fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies and types. He was fleshing out the Old Testament doctrines in a precise and unique way through his miraculous birth and through his holy life and faithful ministry. These events are carefully chronicled in the scriptures for all to see, and they present a beautiful symbiosis, rich with spiritual significance and precision. You see, nothing that Jesus did was unnecessary or unimportant. He declared clearly that he was here only to do his Father's will. He said the things his Father gave him to say. He did the things that his Father gave him to do. He went where the Father bade him go, ministering only to those whom the Father had specified. You remember? He didn't want to take the message to the Gentiles, only to the house of Israel. Nothing in the life of Jesus was a matter of chance or whimsy. If you pick up almost any theological work, any evangelical theological work, you will see these truths as they are fleshed out. Theological works, especially those that were written before the 20th century, are uniquely rich with the theology, especially the doctrine of salvation, soteriology. All of them, all, except those that were written by and for Catholics. These books are either confusing or they don't reach the subject. There are 3 doctrinal books written by Catholics, written for Catholics, that I believe are symbolic. One is the Catholic Catechism. The most current edition of the Catholic Catechism is 1994. The second one would be the Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. This is a seminary textbook. It's a basic course in dogmatic theology, written in German and translated into English in 1955. It comes with the official Nihil Obstat, which literally means it can be printed. And it comes with the Imprimatur, which literally says in Latin, print it. The last one is a book on the canons and decrees of the Council of Trent. It is the English translation by a Roman Catholic priest. Only one, the canons and decrees of the Council of Trent, tackles the issue of salvation by God's grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. And it denounces that concept in the strongest possible way. You see, the telling feature of this work is that they get every single doctrine right. But then they proceed to condemn anyone who believes such things, condemning these things as anathema. Over and over, the doctrines are explained in clear terms, followed by an equally clear denunciation in the strongest possible way. If you believe these doctrines, they believe that you ought to go to hell. What does Rick Warren have to offer to a group like this? The gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ in its clearest possible terms? Will he do it? No, he won't do that. To do so would undermine everything he has tried to do in the last 5 years as he's been cozying up to Catholics. They would never invite him back. Let me give you just a little bit of a history lesson. In the early days of Christianity, there were apostles, disciples, but there were the apostles' doctrines. Later in the 4th and 5th centuries, there was the challenge to those doctrines from a man by the name of Pelagius. And his doctrine, Pelagianism, taught that human beings were not deceitful above all things and desperately wicked at all. He taught that human beings were not dead in trespasses and sins. Rather, he taught that human heart was fully capable of making a rational decision about God and about Jesus, and didn't need any help from God or God's grace to make this work. He simply needed to understand his need, and he would be perfectly capable of making the right decision. Augustine spent the last 20 years of his life debating Pelagius and Pelagianism, showing him the error of his way and branding it the heresy that it really is. Pelagianism is still considered a wicked heresy, even by the Roman Church. In the 6th century, as political Rome fell, ecclesiastical Rome began a political ascendancy, culminating with Pope Leo III as he crowned Charlemagne emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This would have been New Year's Day Eve, it's Christmas Eve, 800 AD. With Charlemagne and with this designation, we start to see this divine right of kings to rule. A divine right that was granted by the church and its pope. Roman Catholicism dominated Europe and South Central America with vicious pogroms and persecutions called the Inquisition. We talked about that last week. You need to look at that. Beginning somewhere in the 13th century and running all the way up through the middle of the 19th century, Roman Catholicism stood against anyone who would deny that what they were teaching was right. To be accused of heresy under the Inquisition, heresy meaning denying the teachings of the church, was to die a long and horrible death at the hands of inquisitors, or very often the civil authorities urged on by the Pope. In 1513, there was a German monk by the name of Martin Luther who challenged the church's official teaching on faith. And the Reformation, as it came to be known, was born and dramatically opposed Roman Catholic doctrine, specifically their doctrine of salvation. And it took the church only 22 years to convene a council designed to denounce each of these doctrines held by the reformers. And when you read these things, the thing that amazes you the most is that they got it. They understood it. They understood Christian soteriology. They understood the gospel. It was reflected in the wording of their canons. For example, Canon 9. If anyone says that a sinner is justified by faith alone, meaning that nothing else is required to cooperate in order to obtain the grace of justification, let him be anathema. Let him be cursed to hell. Canon number 27. If anyone says that there is not mortal sin except that of unbelief, or that grace once received is not lost through any other sin, however grievous and enormous, except that of unbelief, let him be anathema. Catholics don't believe in eternal security. Neither do Pelagians. And this thing goes on, hundreds of these statements, rehearsing Orthodox Christian doctrines and then denouncing them as heresy, condemning anybody who believed them to hell as if they could. The canons and decrees of Trent have never, ever been rescinded. The doctrines held by the Catholic Church in those days is the same as it is today. And prior to the ecumenical efforts of Vatican II in 1962, Roman Catholics firmly held that all non-Catholics were destined for hell. Even after these concessions were made, many Catholics still held to that belief. Subsequent generations, however, not knowing of the Church's original teaching, are more open to non-Catholics and to the charismatic movement. As we move into part 2 on this subject, we'll look at the specific doctrines that support Roman Catholicism and its soteriology and begin to compare them with what the Bible teaches. But for now, suffice it to say, in their own documents, they teach us that they know the truth, but they deny it. The truth is too difficult, too hard, too condemning perhaps, but it isn't for lack of knowing.